You just spent $300 on a tactical survival knife. 7-inch blade, serrated spine, paracord grip, the works. You watch the reviews, you practice the grip, you feel prepared. Here's the thing. That knife is going to get you killed, and the tool that saves your life is sitting in your kitchen drawer right now, probably covered in last Tuesday's spaghetti sauce. The survival knife industry has convinced you that expensive equals effective. They've sold you on penetration, on edge retention, on multi-tool versatility. Sounds reasonable until you realize that zombie combat isn't about precision cuts or field dressing game. It's about blunt force trauma, reach, and not getting grabbed while you're trying to remember which way the serrated edge faces. Most people don't realize this until they're 3 feet from a moving corpse with their fancy knife stuck in a ribcage. Here's the brutal math. A survival knife requires you to get within grabbing distance of a target that doesn't feel pain, doesn't tire, and only needs to connect once. You're betting your life on perfect execution every single time. No misses, no hesitation, no exhaustion after the 5th, 10th, 20th encounter. That confidence you're feeling right now about your knife skills, that's mistake number 1. Let me be clear, I'm not saying knives are useless. I'm saying that the $20 kitchen tool you've ignored is tactically superior in almost every zombie engagement scenario. And I'm about to prove it. If you're serious about surviving the impossible, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This channel exists because most survival advice is fantasy, and you deserve better than dying with expensive gear. Now let's talk about what actually works. The parameters here are simple. We're evaluating tools based on zombie combat reality, not camping utility. Your target has no pain response, limited motor function, and a skull that's surprisingly resistant to puncture but vulnerable to concussive force. You need to destroy the brain or sever the spine, and you need to do it repeatedly without compromising your defensive position. The knife fails on reach, fails on impact force, and fails catastrophically when it gets stuck. We're looking for tools that give you distance, deliver stopping power, and don't trap you in close quarters grappling. Here's what most people get wrong about zombie combat. They think it's about killing. It's not. It's about creating space and buying time. The difference matters. A kill requires precision and commitment. Space creation requires impact and disengagement. The knife demands the former. Kitchen tools provide the latter. That mental shift right there separates survivors from casualties. Let's start with the most underestimated weapon in your kitchen, the cast iron skillet. 12 inches of seasoned metal, 3 to 5 pounds depending on size, and a flat striking surface that delivers devastating blunt force. You're thinking it's too heavy, too awkward, too ridiculous. You would be wrong. The weight is the weapon. A proper cast iron skillet to the temple delivers enough kinetic energy to crack bone and pulp brain tissue. It doesn't puncture, it doesn't get stuck, and it doesn't require edge alignment. The tactical advantages are brutal. First, reach. That 12-inch pan plus your arm gives you nearly 3 feet of engagement distance, half a foot more than most survival knives. You're hitting the threat before it enters your personal space. Second, surface area. The flat face of a skillet distributes force across the skull. You don't need precision, you need contact. Third, defensive capability. That same surface blocks bites, deflects grabs, and creates a physical barrier between you and the threat. Here's the thing most knife enthusiasts miss. Your skillet is a shield. You can ward off multiple threats while maintaining your position. Try that with a blade. You're jabbing, retracting, repositioning, and hoping you don't slip on the floor you just made slick with bodily fluids. The skillet? You swing, you connect, the threat drops or staggers back, and you've still got a barrier between you and the next one. The stamina equation is where this gets ugly for knife believers. Stabbing requires repetitive forward thrusts with arm extension and retraction. You're recruiting shoulder, tricep, and core muscles in a controlled, precise motion. Do that 10 times and you're winded. 20 times and you're compromised. The skillet uses a rotational swing that leverages your entire body. It's less precise, but you can maintain it for exponentially longer. When you're facing more than 3 or 4 zombies, that difference becomes survival. Number 2. The meat cleaver. Not a chef's knife, not a butcher's knife, a cleaver. That rectangular blade, that forward-weighted balance, that chopping geometry. You've ignored it because it looks brutal and primitive. It is brutal and primitive. That's exactly why it works. A cleaver is designed to separate bone from bone with a single decisive strike. Zombie skulls are bone. The math is simple. The advantage here is commitment reduction. Your survival knife requires multiple precise strikes to penetrate a skull, 3 to 5 good hits depending on angle and force. Each strike is an opportunity for the target to grab you, for you to miss, for the blade to deflect off bone curvature. The cleaver? One overhead strike with proper force. You're leveraging gravity, body weight, and that forward-balanced blade geometry. The skull fractures or splits. The brain is compromised. You're disengaging before the body hits the ground. Here's where people fuck this up. They try to use a cleaver like a knife. They grip it for precision instead of power. They aim for specific targets instead of committing to the arc. A cleaver demands a different philosophy. You're not surgically striking, you're demolishing. That mental switch is uncomfortable for people trained on knife combat principles, but it's the difference between effective and ineffective force application. The defensive weakness of a cleaver is reach and versatility. You've got maybe 18 inches of engagement distance, which puts you closer than the skillet. You're also committed to overhead strikes, which means you're vulnerable during the wind-up. But here's the tactical application. The cleaver is your secondary weapon. You carry the skillet in your offhand for defense and space creation. The cleaver is your finishing tool. Skillet creates the opening. Cleaver delivers the kill strike. You're not choosing between them. You're understanding their roles in a tactical system. Number 3, the fire extinguisher. And this is where we separate people who think tactically from people who think in terms of weapons. You've walked past this thing 1,000 times without considering its combat potential. It's not a weapon. It's a force multiplier. 5 pounds of compressed chemical agent in a pressurized canister with a 10 to 15-foot discharge range. You're not swinging it, although you could. You're deploying it. The tactical application is psychological and physical disruption. Zombies operate on visual tracking and sound response. You discharge a fire extinguisher in an enclosed space, and you've created an instant smokescreen that blinds threats, masks your position, and coats every surface in slippery chemical powder. They can't see you. They can't track you efficiently. They're stumbling through a cloud while you're repositioning to an exit or a defensive position. This isn't about killing. It's about breaking contact when you're outnumbered. The sound element compounds the effect. That pressurized discharge creates a sustained hissing roar that drowns out your footfalls and breathing. You're operating in sensory chaos while the threats are operating on degraded input. You've bought yourself 10 to 20 seconds of tactical advantage. That's enough time to reach a stairwell, barricade a door, or flank to a better position. Here's the lethality component people don't expect. A 5-pound metal cylinder is a devastating blunt weapon. You empty the canister to create your cover. Then you've got a club with a flat striking surface and enough mass to cave in a skull with a proper overhead swing. The discharge nozzle becomes a puncture tool. You're converting a defensive tool into offensive capability without switching equipment. That's tactical efficiency. The obvious limitation: you get one discharge. Once that canister is empty, you're committed to using it as a club or you're abandoning it. You can't reload in the field. But here's the thing. If you're using a fire extinguisher, you're already in a situation where you need to break contact immediately. You're not looking for sustained combat. You're looking for an exit. The tool matches the tactical need. Number 4, the rolling pin. And before you laugh, let me explain the physics of a 2-pound hardwood cylinder. This is about weight distribution and striking geometry. A rolling pin puts mass behind a relatively small impact point, not as small as a knife edge, but concentrated enough to deliver focused trauma. You're getting the benefits of a baton with the availability of a kitchen drawer. The two-handed grip gives you control and power generation. You're not relying on single-arm strength. You're using your entire upper body to drive the strike. That means more force on target and better control during engagement. You can strike, block, and manipulate threats without losing your grip or compromising your stance. It's less lethal than a cleaver, but more controllable in confined spaces where full swings aren't possible. The reach advantage over a knife is significant. You're adding 8 to 10 inches of standoff distance, which doesn't sound like much, until you realize that's the difference between a zombie's grasping fingers, reaching your forearm, or missing entirely. That margin compounds over multiple engagements. You're taking less risk with each strike. Here's the psychological edge that matters. A rolling pin doesn't look like a weapon. If you're moving through a contested space and you encounter other survivors, you're not immediately flagged as a threat. A person holding a cleaver or a knife triggers defensive responses. A person holding a rolling pin looks like they grabbed what was available. That perception management matters when you're trying to avoid human conflict in a zombie scenario. You're armed without advertising aggression. The tactical weakness is obvious. Limited stopping power against skull bone. You're delivering blunt trauma, but you need multiple strikes to reliably destroy brain function. That extends your engagement time and increases your risk. But as a supplementary tool or a weapon of opportunity, it outperforms a knife in versatility and defensive capability. You're not choosing this as your primary weapon. You're understanding its role in a layered defense strategy. Number 5, kitchen shears, and this is where we talk about soft tissue destruction versus skull penetration. Not the cheap scissors from the junk drawer. Proper kitchen shears with thick blades and a strong fulcrum point. These are designed to cut through chicken bones and thick cartilage. Zombie neck tissue and facial structures? Same material resistance, same vulnerability to shearing force. The tactical advantage is target selection. You're not trying to penetrate the skull. You're going for the neck, the jaw hinge, the eye socket. You're destroying motor control and sensory input with precise controlled cuts. A pair of shears through the throat severs the trachea and major blood vessels. It doesn't kill instantly in a traditional sense, but it compromises the zombie's ability to bite and vocalize. That's tactical damage, even if it's not a kill. The close quarters advantage is brutal. When a zombie has grabbed you and you're in that nightmare scenario where you're too close for a knife or a skillet, shears give you a puncture and cut capability without requiring a full swing or thrust. You're jabbing into soft tissue, the eye, the throat, the temple, and you're causing damage that disrupts the threat's effectiveness. It's not clean, it's not honorable, it works. Here's the psychological component that matters. Shears are intimidating in a way that knives aren't. That scissoring motion, that cutting geometry, it triggers a visceral response. If you're facing other survivors who are considering violence, a person wielding shears looks unhinged enough to create hesitation. You're using psychological warfare without firing a shot. That edge matters when resources are scarce and human conflict becomes inevitable. The limitation is obvious. You need proximity. You're inside the zombie's grabbing range to use shears effectively. That means you're accepting extreme risk for targeted damage. But here's the tactical reality. Sometimes you're going to end up in grabbing range whether you want to or not. Your knife has the same proximity requirement, but with less versatility. Shears give you more target options and a higher probability of disabling damage at the same risk level. Now let's talk about why all of these tools outperform your $300 survival knife in the only metric that matters: survival probability over time. A knife gives you maybe 3 to 5 effective kills before fatigue compromises your precision. The blade dulls, your arm tires, your grip slips. You're operating on declining capability with each engagement. Kitchen tools operate on different performance curves. The skillet doesn't dull. The cleaver's impact force doesn't diminish with repeated use. The fire extinguisher gives you a tactical option that doesn't exist with a knife. You're building a layered system instead of relying on a single tool that demands perfection under stress. That's the difference between tactical thinking and equipment fetishism. The cost-effectiveness is almost insulting. You spent $300 on a knife. A cast-iron skillet costs $30. A cleaver costs $25. A fire extinguisher costs $40. You're getting superior tactical capability for a fraction of the investment, and here's the thing. You probably already own all of these tools. You've been walking past your zombie defense kit every time you made breakfast. The availability factor matters more than people realize. When the outbreak hits, every sporting goods store, every gun shop, every tactical supply outlet gets stripped in hours. You know what doesn't get looted? Kitchen supply stores, hardware stores, restaurant supply warehouses. Everyone is chasing the fantasy of tactical gear while ignoring the reality of effective tools. You're operating on knowledge that gives you access to resources that others are overlooking. Here's the brutal assessment. In a short-term survival scenario, first 72 hours, you could make an argument for a quality knife as part of a balanced toolkit. But in any extended scenario where you're facing multiple engagements, resource scarcity, and degraded physical condition, kitchen tools give you better odds. They're more durable, more versatile, more available, and they don't require the same level of training to use effectively. You're maximizing survival probability with tools that don't demand expertise. The long-term rating for surviving with a tactical knife as your primary weapon? 4 out of 10. You'll make it through the initial chaos if you're lucky and skilled. You won't make it through week 2. The fatigue, the repetitive stress injuries, the inevitable stuck blade scenario that gets you grabbed, these aren't possibilities, they're certainties given enough engagements. With a properly selected and deployed set of kitchen tools, 7 out of 10. You've got layered options, sustainable effectiveness, and the tactical flexibility to adapt to different threat scenarios. That's not a guarantee, but it's better odds than most people are giving themselves. The practical advice is simple. You keep a cast iron skillet near your entry points. You hang your fire extinguisher where you can grab it during an exit. You have your cleaver and shears in accessible locations, not buried in drawers. You drill the deployment sequence until it's automatic. Skillet for space creation, cleaver for kills, extinguisher for breaking contact, shears for close quarters emergencies. You're building a system, not collecting weapons. All right, your turn. If you had 60 seconds before the first zombie hit your door, which tool would you grab? Would you trust your expensive knife or the $20 cleaver? Would you remember the fire extinguisher or go straight for a blade? Here's the harder question. If you had to survive a week in an urban environment with only kitchen tools, what's your loadout and why? No plot armor, no protagonist luck, just honest tactical assessment. Drop your strategy in the comments because I guarantee half of you are still overestimating your knife. If this channel has taught you anything, it's that surviving the impossible means destroying your assumptions before they get you killed. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications. The next video might save your life. And the best part? You won't have to spend $300 to make it work. Now go look at your kitchen with different eyes. Those aren't cooking tools. They're your zombie defense system, and you've been ignoring them your entire life.